As January 6th approached, Trump refocused his efforts closer to home, at his own Department of Justice.
Today, we'll tell the story of how the pressure campaign also targeted the federal agency charged with enforcement of our laws, the Department of Justice.
Trump tried to weaponize the Department of Justice against our own democracy. Bill Barr is the first one to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do that. He steps aside, he resigns, and he's replaced by Jeff Rosen and Richard Donahue, who has a sort of a tag team here.
Rosen was a Republican political appointee who had served throughout Trump's administration. Donahue, also a Republican, had spent much of his career as a government lawyer in the Army and at the Department of Justice.
These are folks who were appointed by Donald Trump. They are aligned with him politically.
Pretty much every day after Barr left, Trump would call Jeffrey Rosen at the Justice Department or his deputy Richard Donahue and try to put pressure on them to get the department to go along with this narrative that there were serious questions about the integrity of the election.
Mr. Donahue, you had a conversation with the president where he raised false claim after false claim with you and Mr. Rosen. How did you respond to what you called a, quote, stream of allegations?
I wanted to try to cut through the noise because it was clear to us that there were a lot of people whispering in his ear, feeding him these conspiracy theories and allegations. As the president went through them, I went piece by piece to say, no, that's false. That is not true. And to correct him really in a serial fashion as he moved from one theory to another.
How did the president respond to that, sir?
He responded very quickly and said, essentially, that's not what I'm asking you to do. What I'm just asking you to do is just say it was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman.
He's saying, don't care about evidence, don't care about facts, just say this. And then I'm going to be able to use that to give people political cover to do what I want them to do, which is to overturn the vote.
I think that's a very unfortunate statement on the president's part, but it wouldn't be the first time that a president made a conscious decision to reject advice from his legal advisors, including the Department of Justice. Is that evidence of criminal misconduct? Could be. But sorting that out before a fair-minded jury, assuming that there's a fair-minded jury, is, I think, another question.
As it became clear Rosen and Donahue wouldn't go along, Trump looked for someone who would.
Trump turns to this mid-level Department of Justice employee, Jeff Clark, and he says, let's put him in as the acting attorney general.
He had been an environmental prosecutor. Clark's official role has nothing to do with anything involving election fraud. He had no business at all being involved in this.
Clark drafted a letter that would claim publicly that the department was concerned about serious allegations of election fraud, even though his superiors had said there was no such evidence.
That letter, of course, was never sent. Clark tried to push for it to be sent by sort of attempting to dethrone acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen.
According to testimony and evidence before the committee, Trump told Clark that he was going to fire Rosen and make him the new Attorney General.
Well, Clark makes an incredibly stupid mistake, which is that he tells Jeffrey Rosen, the acting Attorney General, that he is going to be replaced.
On Sunday the 3rd, he told me that the president had offered him the job and that he was accepting it.
Clark tells him, oh yeah, Trump is gonna put me in. And he gives notice to his opponents. That's always a huge mistake in Washington or anywhere else.
Well, on the one hand, I wasn't going to accept being fired by my subordinate, so I wanted to talk to the president directly.
And there was another crazy White House meeting where Rosen, Donahue meet with Clark, the president, and other presidential advisors in the Oval Office for hours, fighting over whether Clark should be the Attorney General.
Jeff Clark was proposing that Jeff Rosen be replaced by Jeff Clark. And I thought the proposal was asinine.
He repeatedly said to the president that if he was put in the seat, he would conduct real investigations that would, in his view, uncover widespread fraud.
And when he finished discussing what he planned on doing, I said, good, excuse me, sorry, congratulations, you just admitted a first step in your act you take as Attorney General would be committing a felony and violating Rule 6C. You're clearly the right candidate for this job.
And I said, that's right, you're an environmental lawyer. How about you go back to your office and we'll call you when there's an oil spill.
Mr. Donahue, did you eventually tell the president that mass resignations would occur if he installed Mr. Clark and what the consequences would be?
I said, Mr. President, within 24, 48, 72 hours, you could have hundreds and hundreds of resignations of the leadership of your entire Justice Department because of your actions. What's that going to say about you?
In the end, that proves to be enough to stop Trump very reluctantly, from putting Clark in as his acting Attorney General. Talk about a close call.
But for the January 6th committee and federal prosecutors, the pressure on the Justice Department was another part of the conspiracy.
He's trying to enlist as part of a scheme these officials of the Justice Department, lawyers, officers of the court, people who've taken an oath to uphold the rule of law, and they won't go along with it.
The defendant and co-conspirators attempted to use the power and authority of the Justice Department to conduct sham election crime investigations.
As with the pressure on state election officials, Trump's attorneys have argued that he was just doing his job.
Urging his own Department of Justice to do more to enforce the laws that it is charged with enforcing is unquestionably an official act of the president.
And the president is entitled to name anyone he wants as the Attorney General.
Deliberating about whether to replace the acting Attorney General of the United States is also a core presidential function.
Jack Smith has made that judgment that has crossed over the line into criminal conduct, but he's now going to have to prove that the president went over that line, whatever that line is.